Greetings. Today is 4/30/2019, and I was not expecting to do this video. Over the weekend, I prepared for two other videos that I wanted to do to address some things that I'm seeing a lot of error. The first is concerning the time of the Gentiles. The time of the Gentiles has been fulfilled, and so many people keep arguing with me because of the doctrines of men, saying that they're not fulfilled. So I decided to prepare for a video, but I didn't have time to record it. And then the other video is concerning the 42 months. The Messiah brought some things into focus that are more accurate than what I was putting. But yesterday, when I was contemplating the scriptures and praying to the Messiah, he revealed some extremely intriguing information concerning the first rapture. So I decided not to wait and make this video, get the information out. You guys can take it to the Messiah in prayer, contemplate it, and keep a watch out. So I was going over the reoccurring themes concerning the first rapture. All right. Now, like we've said in the past, the first rapture is the one that is sudden, comes like quickly like a thief, traps the whole world. The destruction's sudden, because we're talking many people being removed quickly. And the second rapture is not sudden, and it does not take people by surprise. Okay, the first one does. A majority of the world, even a majority of Christianity, is taken by surprise. But the second rapture, the day of redemption, that is not sudden, and that does not take people by the surprise. It's drawn out. It's the seals are the 7-year trial. And for them 7 years, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse until finally the sixth seal. And the sixth seal is drawn out over a 2-year period of time. The great earthquake happens right after the fifth seal, and then you have the second great American solar eclipse, and then you have the next blood moon triad. And then the stars fall. And then we see the wormhole rip open in space. And then we see New Jerusalem come through the wormhole. And the wormhole is the sign of the Son of Man. And then New Jerusalem is here. None of that is sudden. None of that takes anybody by surprise. It's all blatant. The destruction is worse and worse and worse and worse, prolonged for a 7-year period. So the reoccurring theme for the first rapture is that it's sudden, takes people by surprise, traps them, snares them, etc., etc. So I was contemplating that, going over it, because I just have this concrete sense in my spirit that the answers are in the scripture. And it's just a matter of getting to them. So even though I struck out with the date, you know, when you strike out, it's only one time at bat. a baseball game, you usually get a couple times at bat. So if you strike out once, you still have one or two more times at bat. And so I just had this concrete sense that the answers are in there. So I kept praying to the Messiah, show me what I'm missing. Help me to get to the answer. And one of the things I noticed, I believe it was in Luke, it said that it's an appointed time for the first rapture. So I started looking into appointed times, and it brought me to the second Passover. And when I looked into the ancient Hebrew on the wording for the second Passover, they couldn't keep the first Passover because they were defiled for being in contact with, the scripture says, a corpse or a dead body. But when you look into the Hebrew, it's basically saying flesh. So basically, it's almost like it's saying they weren't able to go in the first Passover because they're still in their flesh. And the first Passover was the ancient Israelites. And then we see in the scriptures in the Messiah promising the Church of Philadelphia that they're going to be kept from the hour of trial. And then we see in, I believe it's Isaiah, where I think it's the virgin or the bride is hid in the chamber while the indignation passes. So I was thinking that it is a Passover. It's the Passover pilgrimage. The first rapture is the fulfillment of the Passover pilgrimage. However, the first Passover was fulfilled by the ancient Israelites. So the Passover pilgrimage fulfillment of the actual rapture may be the second Passover. So I went in that direction, and it was interesting because the second Passover has an actual date. It's the 14th day of the second month, which is right around the time of when the ancient Israelites crossed the Red Sea, and then the sudden destruction came upon the Egyptians. Because sudden destruction is another recurring theme. Excuse me. So while I was researching that and contemplating it, I was going over the Gospels that talk about the first rapture. Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17, Luke 21. And here are the themes, the recurring themes, all right? So one of the recurring themes is the open door, okay? So in Matthew 7, we see that many who say that they've done all these wonderful things and good things, and in the name of the Messiah, he tells them that they're not allowed in because he doesn't recognize them. And as we talked about in the past, the reason he doesn't recognize them is because they don't have the Torah. Okay? Obeying the commandments is fulfilling the contract of the covenant between us and the Messiah, us and the Almighty. Okay? Yes, his blood redeems us, has paid for our salvation. However, there's terms to the agreement. He just doesn't give it out to everybody. The promises are almost always followed by an if. If you walk in my ways, then I will fulfill my side of the contract. And when you obey the commandments and observe the Sabbath and observe the holy days, that the Almighty tells us that is his mark on his people, the distinguishing mark. And that's why the Messiah doesn't recognize a majority of Christianity for the open door. It's because they don't have they only have faith. They only have one half of the requirement. They don't have the other half that marks them as being his. And as we talked about in the past, it's actually, when you keep the commandments, the mark is actually the wedding ornaments and the wedding attire. Okay, so like salvation, faith is just putting on like the undergarment just to cover your nakedness. But obeying the commandments, which is ultimately loving the Messiah, because he says, if you love me, you'll obey me. If you love me, you'll do the will of my Father. If you love me, you'll obey the commandments of my Father, etc., etc., etc. So when you do that, that's when you put on the wedding attire. And that's when he recognizes you and brings you in, which is the wise virgins, the wise servants, the elders, the Church of Philadelphia. Okay? So we see this open door, and the open door is the same open door. There's only one open door, and that's the open door in heaven in Revelation 4:1. Matthew 7, Matthew 25, Luke 13, Revelation 3, they're all talking about this open door. Okay? Another recurring theme is that he comes quickly. Okay? He uses the term as a thief, but it's in reference to quick. A thief, gets in and gets out. So it's meaning that he comes quickly. And then all kinds of scriptures talking about him coming quickly. And then another recurring theme is the sudden destruction. And, all these scriptures are all talking about these same events. So they all complement each other for most of these themes, okay? And one thing that's tied to the sudden destruction is that there's the peace and safety right prior to it. And like we talked about in the past, there was a peace and safety summit in the final month of the final year in the 69th week, which was back in March 15th, I think it was, 14th to 15th or 13th to 14th, the Peace and Security Summit for the Middle East, which is where that's the only thing that's left at the end. Everything else is destroyed. And another thing that people fight me tooth and nail with is the 70 weeks people cannot comprehend the 70 weeks. That the 70 week began, and that it's for believers, true believers. I'm telling you, the doctrines of men are destroying people. But anyway, another recurring theme was the days of Noah. Okay, and then another recurring theme is that a majority are clueless and get overtaken. Another recurring theme is that there's a separation. One goes, one stays, and then we see that separation with the 10 virgins. And in these other scriptures where the Messiah says, I don't know you, depart from me, you who are without the Torah, you are who are practicing lawlessness. All right? And then, like I said before, that it's an appointed time. Okay? So, in reference to the barley, okay, like we talked about in the past, the raptures, the final 14 years, the raptures, the 4 raptures, with the 3 main harvests, they are related to the growing season of ancient Israel. Okay? And it's based on maturity. The barley is the first to mature during the growing season. That's why it's harvested first. And that's the wise virgins. Elder just means someone that is mature, wise. And it's summed up right there with the barley being the first to mature, and they're the wise virgins. Okay. Then the second, and that's the spring. And then the second is the wheat of the main harvest we're talking about. And the wheat is mature in the summer. And then that will be the day of redemption. And that's the biggest harvest, the Jubilee feast. And then the final harvest to mature is the grapes. And as we talked about in the past, they have to be crushed. They got to go into the wrath, because at the time when the Messiah comes and gathers everybody into the clouds, they were not believers. So they were left. That's the only reason why they're in the wrath. All believers are not a portion to wrath. So that's why the day of redemption is prior to the wrath. Okay, so we see the barley is the first to mature. Boaz, the Redeemer, comes in the barley harvest. The Passover pilgrimage is for the barley harvest season. Now, the Messiah is not the loaf of bread, of the unleavened barley bread that's waved as a first fruit. Because I was a little stuck on that, thinking that, about the leaven, because the first fruits of the Pentecost, there's a barley and there's a loaf of barley and a loaf of wheat, and they both have leaven. So I was doubting a little bit about the barley. So I looked into the leaven. What is it meaning? And the Messiah tells us that it's in reference to the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. And what I got from that is that the wise virgins don't have the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. That's why they don't have leaven. When the first fruits of the barley when the high priest waves that barley loaf, it doesn't have leaven. Where the first fruits of the wheat, they do have leaven. And I believe it's that leaven that causes them to remain. And that hypocrisy of the Pharisees is, number one, they say they know the Messiah. They say they have a relationship with him. But in reality, the relationship is shallow and they don't have a clue of who the Messiah is. They've imagined the Messiah, you know, on one end of the spectrum, Christianity, probably about 50% of them imagined the Messiah into something that he's not. They basically made him into this 1970s huggy hippie, you know. Oh, you know, you're living in sin, don't worry about it. Come here, give me a hug. It'll come out in the wash. Don't worry about it, you know what I mean? And they basically made him into the bunny rabbit of the tribe of Judah. Alright? And it's just not true. I mean, the Messiah is the lion of the tribe of Judah. I mean, he's the same one that told the ancient Israelites to kill everything of Amalek. Kids, seniors, cattle, babies, everything. Alright? And then they're trying to say, like, you know, you gotta be nice to everyone all the time, you know. You can't use adjectives because adjectives might offend somebody, and they're bowing down to the false god of political correctness, which is Baal worship, is what they're doing. That's more than half of Christianity. And then about 30% on the other side of the spectrum imagine the Messiah to be the Grim Reaper with a battle axe in one hand and a catty nine tail in another. But my point is that their relationship with him is shallow. They act like they know him, but they don't. You know, they might go to church once a week or whatever, read the scriptures here and there, but really they don't know him. It's hypocrisy. And that's why you see the two loaves representing the two churches that they represent, because the wise virgins is the one loaf representing Philadelphia, and those that remain are the two loaves representing two of the end time churches. I had it figured out, but I don't know it off the top of my head who they are. But anyway, so my point is that the Messiah is not the loaf of the barley bread that's waved. He's the sacrificial lamb. All right? The wise virgins are the barley loaf that's waved. Okay? Second Passover's in the barley harvest season. Israel crossed the Red Sea in the barley harvest season. Israel crossed the Jordan in the barley harvest season. Noah entered the ark in the barley harvest season. Okay, you see where I'm going with this here? I'm just confirming that the Passover pilgrimage is the first rapture, and it's the barley harvest. Okay, another recurring theme here is the sudden destruction came upon the whole world in the barley harvest season during the flood of Noah. In the days of Noah, the sudden destruction came upon the Egyptians with the flood during the barley harvest season. The Messiah uses the days of Noah to describe the sudden destruction after the first rapture. And This is what he says. All right. So he says, and I'm not so sure that there's supposed to be a space right here, because a lot of people believe that this is connected to this. All right. So let's start here in 37. And the Messiah, and this is the Messiah speaking in Matthew 24. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay, like we talked about in the past, the coming of the Son of Man is a 7-year process. All right? And what he's talking about here is the start of it. This sudden destruction, his coming like a thief to remove the wise virgins. This is what he's describing right here. And when he's saying it took them all away, that's exactly what he says in it's 1 Thessalonians 5. Okay, when he says it traps, it snares all who dwell on earth. Meaning it doesn't get the wise virgins because they're in New Jerusalem. So everybody on earth, believers and unbelievers, get caught in the trap. The hour of trial. The hour of testing. The hour of temptation. Okay? So, now here's the intriguing information. Maybe some of you already know this, already heard it, but it hit me like a lightning bolt into my brain. Okay, so the Messiah says to us, but as the days of Noah were, so also the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay, so right there we see that he's talking about the coming of the Son of Man. And then once we read the whole thing where he talks about the flood took them all away, and then down here where one will be in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. So we see the separation. And then he goes on down here to say about the hour, which is in the Greek, it's talking about the time period. And then he says about the day, it's talking about the watch. Okay? So the hour is basically the season, and the day is that he's actually talking about what part of the day, what watch of the day. All right? But my point is that we can conclude that this right here, but as the days of Noah were, so also the coming of the Son of Man be. Meaning we can conclude that this is the beginning, the start of the coming. Okay? And then in verse 38 he says, for as in the days that were before the flood, which is the sudden destruction, which is the reoccurring theme concerning the first rapture, the sudden destruction, the flood of Noah, the flood that took out the Egyptians. The ancient Israelites crossed the Red Sea. Noah entered the ark. Okay? For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. Do you see that? So he's saying the days until the day. If the good man of the house had known. Okay, and what's interesting about this little singular day right here is that the scriptures actually give us the day. So contrary to the flood, the sudden destruction that overtook the Egyptians, where we don't know the day, the specific flood and sudden destruction that the Messiah himself refers to when he's telling us about the day actually has a day in the scripture. Shall we? So we go back to Genesis 6. Genesis 7. Good old number 7. Okay, and starting with verse 1. And the Almighty said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark. For thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Okay, then he talks about bringing in the animals and all the stuff to replenish the earth. Okay. Then he says, For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made, I will destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Almighty commanded him. Okay? And remember that this was accounted as faith. The new, I believe, I forget what, if it was Paul or James or who was saying it, but they in the New Testament it's explained that Noah, taking the Almighty at his word that it was going to rain and flood the earth, and built this massive ark. It was accounted to him as faith, and the Almighty says that he's the only one that was righteous because he acted upon it. All right, and this is another perfect example that faith is an action. All right, these people that insist that we are exempt from obeying the commandments, even though the Messiah says it over and over and over that loving him is proven by obeying his commandments, obeying the will of the Father, obeying the commandments of the Father. Honestly, it's burdensome trying to discuss this with people, and they're so bent on the doctrines of men. But anyway, so Noah acted upon it. He had faith that the Almighty was telling him to do the right thing, and he acted upon it. He built the ark, and when the time came, he went in, just as the Almighty commanded him. All right? And then it says, okay, they went in, and it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. Okay? Then it goes on to say, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, on the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Okay? In the self same day entered Noah into the ark. All right? And then we fast forward down here to 16. And the Almighty shut the door. Okay? The Almighty closed it behind him. Now that is a huge clue right there. Because we're talking about the first rapture, which is the open door in heaven. The Messiah tells us that he has the keys to open the door and to close the door. Okay? And he tells us that it occurs quickly. The door opens, everything occurs quickly, and then after it is sudden destruction. And he shuts it. And it doesn't matter who tries coming in after that, the door is shut. The destruction comes. The trial begins. Okay? So this is the huge clue right here. The Almighty himself shut the door. Not Noah and his sons, not Noah and his family, the Almighty himself. Okay? And it gives us the exact day. On the 17th day of the 2nd month. Now, when the Messiah revealed this to me last night, I did a search to see who else may have come across this information. And interestingly, many people have said this in the past, maybe not exactly how I'm saying it. And there's even a few videos. I didn't watch them. I just looked at the titles. But there's even a few videos that are within the past 2 weeks. People talking about the rapture being the days of Noah, the Noah's Ark. All right. Now, the one video that I did play for a couple seconds, he had the wrong date. He had it as the April 28th. And the mistake he made was that he concluded that Noah entered on the first day. And that's the way the English portrays it here, that he entered the ark, and then 7 days later the floods began, and then it was closed. But see, what's going on right here is that Noah is packing up the ark for these 7 days. That's what's happening. So, excuse me. So, up here, the Almighty tells him to enter the ark, but that's what the English says here. But what's really being said is the Almighty's telling him to pack up. I'm about to open the floodgates. You have 7 days. That's what's going on right here. So the Almighty tells him, pack up, about to open the floodgates. You have 7 days. Boom, Noah starts packing up. On the final day, it says he entered the ark on that day. The Almighty shut the door for him, and then it began to rain. And the floodwaters were opened up, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that person got the date wrong because they didn't understand what was happening right here. And then a couple other videos. The one guy, I personally don't want to comment. That person, whatever. But anyway, so it's the 17th day of the second month that the door was shut. All right. So there it is. The Messiah is talking about the first rapture. We know that it's the open door in heaven. We know that it's sudden destruction. It comes quickly. He comes quickly. We know that it catches everybody in a trap, believers and unbelievers. A majority of Christianity will be caught in it. 95%. And he tells us that it's like it was in the days of Noah. All right, and then we see him refer to the day that Noah entered into the ark. So it's like he's telling us right here, in the exact spot where he's talking about the first rapture, that he tells us right here in 38, the day Noah entered the ark. And then when you go back to Genesis 7 and read about the day Noah entered the ark, it tells us the exact date, and then it tells us that the Almighty himself shut the door. Okay, so what's my point? My point is that I believe this is an extremely strong possibility that the Messiah is telling us right here the date of when this occurs, right? So the Messiah uses days to describe the sudden destruction, and then he transitions to the term day to describe when Noah enters the ark. All right? And another interesting thing is that the 17th day of the second month is the 22nd day on the Omer count. All right, and there were 22,000 Levites who camped near the tabernacle in the wilderness. And while I was contemplating and researching and studying this, the Messiah showed me that the wise virgins are basically the Levites in New Jerusalem. Okay. And I believe the Messiah uses 10 for the 10 virgins in reference to a tithe to 10%. Okay. Basically showing us that only 10% of modern Christianity are truly faithful and not idolatrous. Meaning, you know, in the past when I thought of idolatry, you know, I thought about, you know, a witch or something like that. But really, idolatry is just putting anything above the Messiah. And like I said before, the easiest way to figure out if you're doing that is, what do you spend the most time thinking about and talking about? And whatever you spend the most time thinking about and talking about, that is what rules your heart and your mind. So if you spend the most time talking about work, or your family, or Monday Night Football, or your hot rod, or whatever else, Game of Thrones, Avengers, whatever else, then that's idolatry. The virgins are only worship the Messiah. Okay, that's what virgin means. They are not mixed up in idolatry. So they have the Messiah on the throne of their heart and their mind. All right? So when you look back in... Oh, do I have that up? No, I don't have it up. Exodus. It must be in Exodus. I think it's Exodus 13, I think. Yeah. Okay. So when you go back to Exodus 13, the Almighty says that the firstborn of everything are His. Okay. Including the people. Alright? But then when they're in the wilderness, where would that be? After Mount Sinai. Okay, so right here in Exodus 24, the people confirm their covenant, their contract with the Almighty. Like I said, it's a contract. You got to abide by the terms, and the Almighty and the Messiah are faithful to always abide by their terms. Okay. So now they're building the tent. All right. Where's the 22,000? Oh, here it is. was Numbers, not Exodus. Okay, so Numbers 3. So in Exodus, we see where the Almighty declares that the firstborn are His, to consecrate them to Him. All right? But then later on, he changes it to the Levites. He basically kind of says that now from this point on, the Levites shall be mine. All right? So he says, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the sons of Israel instead of every firstborn. All right? Now, what I think is going on here is that the firstborn, when you add the firstborn and the Levites together, that makes up the tithe. All right? But then the Almighty says that He's only going to take the Levites. And to me, that's a picture of the wise virgins. All right? And interesting, like I said, interestingly, down here when they did the count, the Levites were the ones that camped right next to the tabernacle. All right? And their number was 22,000. So then fast forward to the New Testament and Revelation, we see the wise virgins, the Church of Philadelphia, they are camped right around the throne in the temple, in the tabernacle. And they're seen with the Messiah in his high priest garb. Got his vesture on in Revelation 4. And then the Church of Philadelphia is promised to have an important position in New Jerusalem. All right? Nobody else is promised that. And they have the crowns and they have the thrones. Everybody else, when they're seen, they just have the palm branches in Revelation 7. That's all they have is palm branches in their hands. And they're clothed in white, of course. All right, so obviously the Church of Philadelphia is something different. They have an important position. They're around the throne. All right. My point is that they are the Levites in New Jerusalem. They're the ones conducting the services like the Levites did. And there was 22,000 of them. And this date, the 17th day of the second month, is Omer Day 22. All right? Just a little interesting tidbit in my opinion. So, what's my point? My point is that there is a very strong possibility that the open door in heaven will occur in the final week prior to the state of Israel turning 71. Okay? Because the state of Israel is the physical sign of the generation. And the Almighty uses the term a nation born in a day. Born meaning that's when the generation, the count begins. Okay? And it's only for a sign. All right? Israel is not physical. And I'm going to cover that in the Gentile video that I do. Because people are so bent that Israel gets some type of special treatment. And all of that has been fulfilled. Okay? And the problem is that people don't understand what Israel is. Okay? I'll give you a little preview. Israel is not a people. It's not a nation. It's not a land mass. Israel is a covenant. All right? It's a covenant. That's what the Almighty told Abraham, and that's what he told them all down through the generations. My covenant with you. But they didn't abide to the terms. Now today, there is neither Jew nor Greek. It's only, do you participate in the covenant? Doesn't matter what your bloodline is. Doesn't matter what nation you come from. Doesn't matter your gender. Do you partake in the covenant? And it's an action. All right? You got to abide by the terms. But anyway, so the state of Israel turns 71 on May 14th. And as per the Psalm 90, from 71 to 80 is labor and sorrow. Okay? Meaning 71 has to start the hard times. And the 17th day of the second month will be the final week prior to the state of Israel turning 71. And I believe that the scripture suggests that the Messiah is telling us the answer to the date of his, when he starts his coming, which is the first rapture. And the 71 to 80, or excuse me, the 71 is the beginning of the trial. All right? It goes to 80 because there's the 3.5 years with the 144,000 and the new believers. That's why it goes to the 80. All right? And another interesting tidbit is that the 17th day of the second month is 8 days prior to Israel turning 71. And there's many things in Scripture that involve 8 days. The 8th day was the solemn assembly. It was 8 days until a baby boy was circumcised, which is the covenant. That was the original covenant. Abraham circumcising his people as a physical sign that they declare to abide by the terms of the Almighty. All right. So, very exciting time. And I promised you guys last video to go over these, and I forgot about it because I keep flapping my gums in videos. I could talk and talk about the Messiah all day long and never get bored of it. But anyway, so here is the updated version of the cleaned up timeline. All right. So right here, this weekend coming up, strong possibility in reference to the day Noah entered the ark and the door was shut by the Almighty. All right. And the 42 months, I'm going to do a little update video on that. And here is the Daniel 9 timeline. People, I got booted off a website, banned from a website, you know, because even though we're supposed to be soldiers for Christ, a majority of Christianity is threatened and fears adjectives. And whatever. But anyway, when I tell people about this, the 70th week has begun, and that the 70 weeks are only for believers, they just can't grasp it. I don't understand why. And they try saying, well, it's for the Daniel's people and for the city. And they can't seem to get that the 70 weeks for your people, it ends for them because they're cut off, reaped. And then it begins, the 70 weeks determined for your city begins the final desolations, which is the 71st week. So it ends for your people and it begins for your city. Like, I don't understand what's so hard to understand about that. But people are so bent on the doctrines of men. So, plus, like I showed them, it fits perfectly with all the other confirmations and scriptures of this sequence of events. The anointed removed, and then the beast released. The anointed removed, and then the city trampled. So, I was doing a little more studying on this, about the grandsons of Noah. But I do believe this is still a good illustration. Alright, so I got that. Now, for everyone who doesn't make it, which is a majority, like I said, 90% of Christianity is not going to make the first rapture. It's just a cold, hard truth. But, it'll all be crystal clear soon, right? So if you find yourself left behind, if you remain, first thing I advise as far as relationship with the Messiah is researching about the commandments. All right. The scriptures tell us exactly what commandments we need to keep that marks us as his people. Now, like the Messiah explained to us in the Gospels, the Pharisees were putting on a bunch of rules, adding on a bunch of rules that weren't necessary. And then a lot of the ordinances Moses gave because the Israelites' hearts were hard. And then another thing is that a lot of the other stuff was just given for healthy living, okay? But if you research it out, you'll find what commandments you need to obey that marks you as the Almighty, the Messiah's people, okay? That's the first thing I would advise. The second thing I would advise is to get in tune with the Almighty's time. And this is the proper calendar, the 364-day mathematical calendar. 0 human intervention needed. It's a beautiful thing. Extremely beautiful thing. I wish I knew this 10 years ago. I really do. But you know, me struggling to find this information helped fine-tune other areas of my studies. So anyway, this is the calendar that the Almighty gave to us in the beginning, and He doesn't change. Okay, so it's 364 days. All right. Now, the easiest way that I found to get this into your head, into your brain, into your imagination, without it being clouded by the 365.2 day Gregorian brainwashing, is that 52 weeks equals 364 days. Period. Okay? Period. And the new year will always be in the week of the spring equinox, and it's only a marker. All right? So the week of the spring equinox, that Wednesday will be the first day of the year. And really, once you get it once, then all you got to do is count 364 days, and it'll be that it'll end on that Tuesday. And then all months have 30 days, except for the months right before the change of the seasons. There's an extra day added as a season marker. Okay. And then all the feast days and everything will be on the same days of the week. Yes, it's a very beautiful thing. Like I said, I wish I knew this years ago, but so that would be the next thing I would advise, is to get on the proper time. And then you can get chugging along, hunkered down. Like I said, I believe America will be the best place to be. And then you'll get to see, you know, if you live that long, if you don't die of natural causes or whatever, you'll get to see New Jerusalem coming through a wormhole. And it'll look probably about 50 times the size of the moon, because it'll be much closer. But anyway, I hope this helped. I'll be back in a day or two with the Gentile video, and then a day or two after that with the 42-month video. And then hopefully this weekend tells all. All right? May the will of the Almighty be done in the name of His chosen, only begotten Son, YaHushuWaH. Take care.